Graduation day really is a time of passage. We all know that. Every graduation speaker says that. But a passage to what? A mine was watching one of the morning shows and thought it was a promo for some action movie. He said, I kept waiting for them to interview Steven Spielberg. And then I realized it wasn't a movie. It had really happened. Like many of you, my wife Pat and I saw it on television. When the first plane hit the tower, we thought it was an accident, probably the Washington to New York air shuttle, which I've written hundreds of times over the years working for CBS. But I want to tell you about that day and what I learned from it, because it was the hardest day that any of us at CBS News ever went through. And for me, well, it was just very, very difficult. A hard story to cover because it was not a story about others. It was about us too. We were part of it. Our friends and families were at risk. Our country was under attack here at home in the United States of America, and that had never happened before. When Pat and I saw the second plane hit, we knew it was no accident. I dressed as quickly as I could and headed up to the U.S. Capitol, which is where I spend my days covering the Congress. Pat went to Georgetown to keep a long-standing appointment, and as she came to the main thoroughfare, she was looking directly across the thoroughfare and across the Potomac River, and about a mile away, she saw this enormous ball of fire and smoke boil up. She knew somehow it must be connected to what had happened in New York, but she didn't know what. But before the light changed, it came on the radio, there was a report that an airplane had hit the Pentagon. She turned around and headed home, hoping she could catch me because she knew that I was en route to the Capitol. From my car, I called the Washington Bureau Chief, Janet Leisner, to see what the latest developments were. She put me on hold, then she came back on the line and said, where are you? And I said, I'm right at the foot of Capitol Hill. She said, get out of there. We now have a report there's another plane that's been hijacked, and we think it's heading toward the Capitol. I'm trying to get a hold of our people who are in the Capitol right now, and there were 3 of them. What we later learned, of course, was that the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, because those brave passengers forced it down, was the plane that we now think was headed toward the Capitol. So it may well be that I owe my life to those people. Who can say? But I want you to know I'll never forget them. On the Friday before the attack, my own brother spent 6 hours in the Pentagon in the very spot where the aircraft hit the Pentagon. Had the hijackers decided to launch the attack on Friday rather than on Tuesday, perhaps he would be dead. Who can say? In New York, one of the hijacked planes flew directly over the Greenwich Village garden of one of our producers on the CBS Evening News. He saw it go by. He said by a count of maybe 2, he then heard the explosion, got on his bicycle and just raced, not knowing what it was, but raced to what we now know as Ground Zero to see what had happened. He was there when the first building began to fall. A man standing beside him was crushed by rubble. He somehow escaped. He still has lung trouble from all of the debris that he breathed that day. Every one of our reporters that day who went to the scene had some kind of close call. And those of you sitting here arrived at the lobby of CBS, saw a great commotion, asked what happened, and was told a plane had hit one of the towers. She took a deep gasp because her father worked in one of the towers. She ran into the newsroom, called her mother. Her mother said, don't worry, your dad just called. He said he's okay, but he had to call the fire department. A plane hit the other tower. She took another deep breath, walked into the newsroom, and got there in time to see the second plane hit. She never saw her father again. In the midst of all this, we stayed on the air around the clock for 93 hours and 5 minutes, the longest consecutive coverage in the history of CBS News. Other organizations did the same. Why was that? Because that is what we are supposed to do. The Wall Street Journal's headquarters is directly next to one of the Twin Towers. The building was evacuated. We covered the news, others did more difficult things. And that, in the end, is what heroism really is. It is Hacker who's going to be put on trial this year. She said they had asked her to testify because they want to show the jury, when it is picked, the loss that these families had suffered. And I said to her, do you realize that this could be dangerous? Do you realize that the publicity you get could make you a target of the terrorists? And she said, yes, but I love my father. so I'm going to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, if your generation takes that kind of courage and that kind of values into the future, this country is going to be all right. Dealing with the world you enter, though, is going to require more than courage. It's going to require patience, and it's going to require understanding. If you should come to Washington these days, you'll find the most beautiful city in the world is now marred by ugly barriers and concrete barricades. For security reasons, Pennsylvania Avenue is blocked off to traffic around the White House. The Capitol is barricaded off like the palace of some tin-pot dictator. Soon, hidden security cameras will follow your every move if you should choose to walk among the monuments that are the symbols of our freedom. We tolerate all of this as necessary, but we must never accept it as the way it will always be or the way it has to be. Terrorists cannot be appeased any more than the Nazis could be appeased. As our parents and grandparents understood, they must be defeated. The Nazis built the greatest war machine that the world had ever known, but Roosevelt and Churchill recognized the real danger was not the weapons, but the hatred that